It's nice to be here today. And Jerry, I'm glad you're here to speak to us. I've known Jerry for a long time and know he's a great speaker. So I'm looking forward to this. Jerry will summarize the conservation work of the Kansas Land Trust over the past 3 decades, and he'll use an exercise to illustrate how the use of conservation easements with willing landowners can help our community preserve our natural heritage for future generations. Jerry is the executive director of the Kansas Land Trust. In addition, he was a program director for the Kansas Rural Center for 20 years, working with farmers with business planning, crop field tests, management intensive grazing, and farmers markets. He's also a mediator with the Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services at K-State University. And with that said, here's Jerry.
Thanks, Chris. Well, thanks everyone for joining me and learning about land conservation and activities in Kansas, both to protect habitat and prairies and woodlands, prime farmland. Just a little bit of background. I grew up in South Central Kansas. I grew up on a dairy farm and farmed in partnership for a number of years. I was also a short period of time a school teacher as well. I went to a small liberal arts college in Newton, called North Newton, actually, called Bethel College, and got a biology major. And later, I got a master's degree in conflict resolution, and I've been working some with K-State with farmers with mediation, though not this year because of the pandemic. The last 12 years, I've been working with the Kansas Land Trust, and so I will talk a little bit about what the Kansas Land Trust does. We are one of several land trusts in Kansas. The one that probably is most well known is the Nature Conservancy, which conserves land internationally and here in Kansas as well. There's also the Ranchland Trust of Kansas, which is affiliated with the Kansas Livestock Association. And their focus is primarily in the Flint Hills and protecting ranch land. So what I'll do, if all the technology works, I'm going to share a screen with all of you. And I will be using a combination of some slides to talk about our work. I will also show a few short videos and give you some reference where you can follow up with more information on land conservation, what the Kansas Land Trust does, as well as native plants and their medicinal and ecological benefits to Kansas. And so I'm going to share a screen right now, and you are welcome at any time to stop me and ask a question. I actually prefer that because I think it breaks up me speaking. So I think that'll work with everybody. So you'll just have to unmute yourself and ask a question anytime. I think I just want it to be interactive as best we can, even though we're virtual. So I'm going to share my screen right now. Hopefully that will all work. So the Kansas Land Trust has been around for 30 years. This is our 30th anniversary. And sorry, I'm just adjusting my screens here so I can see you as well. So we've been around 30 years, started in 1990, and because it's 3 decades, we've also intentionally tried to honor our past and also think about investing in the future. This is our mission statement. We're here to both protect and preserve all different types of natural lands, both for their ecological and agricultural and scenic and recreational purposes. And some of our chief goals are to together to preserve beauty. This is spiderwort. We also, a key goal or priority for us is protecting prairie. This is a 5,000 acre ranch in Chase County, Spring Hills Ranch. We also protect woodlands and also that they act as carbon sinks to mitigate some of the impacts of climate change. Kansas, unfortunately, is ranks towards the bottom, if not the last in the nation with public access to outdoors, natural lands. And part of our goal is to provide more public access. This here is a picture taken in the Lawrence Nature Park, and the Kansas Land Trust has preserved 2 parts of that 100-acre park that has been critical, that launched the city of Lawrence to protect these 100 acres of woodlands and meadows with hiking trails. And it has over 6 miles of hiking trails. If you're not familiar with the Lawrence Nature Park, it is just north of Free State High School, and it is owned and managed by the city of Lawrence. And the Kansas Land Trust holds, protects about 60 acres of the property. So, and I'll talk a little more about what that means and the history of that as well. This was a hike that we took in January on it, and unfortunately our goal was to have hikes through all the year on all our protected properties. Unfortunately, the pandemic has stopped that in March. We also protect prime farmland, class 1 and 2 soils, which are the best soils in Kansas. And this is a protected farmland that's near Eudora. It also provides water for the city of Eudora. So there's water wells on this protected property. We also protect biodiversity. This is Mead's milkweed. We have 7 properties that host this federally threatened native plant. It's a very fragile plant. We also protect habitat, and also we work to restore habitat as well. So the Kansas Land Trust grew out of a tragedy. A second, I'm adjusting my screen here. And that was the plowing of the Elkins Prairie, which was at 70 acres of the best prairie, the largest prairie in Douglas County. And I'm going to show a short video just to give a little background of what the Elkins Prairie was and what happened that morning.
Jerry, we can't hear the video.
Okay, I'm sorry about that. I'm not sure what happened there. Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can see it, but we can't hear it. If you can try to, there is a button in Zoom for you to use to share your computer audio.
Okay. Oh, I bet that's it because, okay.
I'm going to try this, okay? And I'll go back but can you hear me right now?
Yes.
Okay, let me try this. If this doesn't work, we'll just go on.
Mm-hmm.
Can you hear it now?
No.
Okay, I'm going to not do that then. I'm just because I'm not sure what I'm doing wrong with it. I'm going to look at one more thing, but I'm sorry. I don't know what's going on there. I'm going to go back to my. Can you hear me right now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to go back just to my slideshow then. So the Elkins Prairie was plowed. Oh, wait. The second, what happened there? The Elkins Prairie was plowed in 1990. It was in November, and it was plowed at night. And there was a whole bunch of people that tried to stop the plowing, to protect it, but unfortunately they were unable to do that. And so out of that tragedy and out of that loss, the founders of the Kansas Land Trust worked with the Kansas legislature to get enabling legislation, and that happened in 1992 to allow land trusts to operate in the state of Kansas. And since that time, over the last 30 years, we have protected 77 different properties and preserving over almost 40,000 acres. And that 40,000 acres, that conservation footprint, is similar to the size of the city of Topeka. And these yellow stars indicate where these 77 properties are. And you can see a lot of them are around Fort Riley. We have a partnership with Fort Riley to protect prairies and natural lands around Fort Riley. And so that's where a lot of our protected lands are, but also there's some significant ones that are through the Flint Hills. And then of course we have 11 protected properties in Douglas County. The Native American perspective on land is very different than ours. And this is a quote from Chief Seattle in the mid-1800s. The Native American approach to the land it was foreign to them that you could buy or sell the land. They considered the land itself sacred. When European immigrants came to the United States, they began to institute land ownership. And one way to think about our current form of land ownership is to think of it as a bundle of property rights, in which if you own land, you have a whole bundle of different types of rights. And those rights can be either taken or given or sold to other individuals. And so if you have some land and you take a loan on it, you actually give some rights to the creditor. And if you get behind in paying your loans, they can have the right to foreclose upon it and eventually even take your land. You can also give easement rights to utility companies, to municipalities. And I talk about this only to talk about the land conservation work of Land Trust and the Kansas Land Trust ourselves. We use a legal tool called conservation easements, and these easements protect conservation values, because we place restrictions on land use. And to do that, I want to have an exercise with you of how this works. And if I could have a volunteer, someone to be a volunteer with me, to be a landowner, to pretend to be a landowner, and we'll have a conversation about how we divide up the property rights, those bundles of sticks, between a landowner and the Kansas Land Trust. Is there someone who'd be willing to, play this exercise with me? And it's really not that complicated. but it'll help us all understand how land trust works and how we help protect land.
Okay.
Jerry, I can volunteer. Or Stu, do you want to?
Yeah, I do have 80 acres out here, Jerry. So
Okay.
I'll pretend.
And it's Stu, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, Stu, thanks. Well, this will work really well because if you, and you can see my screen on the left side is a column called Land You Own.
Mhm.
And there's a whole series of what I try to draw as property rights, property sticks. And what a land trust does with a landowner such as Stu is divide up these sticks, divide up these property rights with the whole intent to leave a conservation legacy that after Stu sells it or gives it away, those conservation values, those land uses remain the same forever for all future generations. And it's really a response to the plowing of the Elkins Prairie, because once that owner and a prospective developer plowed that prairie, the value of that prairie was lost forever. And so the people who saw the plowing of the Elkins Prairie tried to figure out what can we do to prevent this from happening again on key lands, sacred lands. And so this is a tool that happens across the entire country. There's about, I think about 1,600 land trusts all over the United States. And so this is how this works. So Stu, you have some land. You said it was 80 acres. Can you describe it a little bit to me? What's on the land?
Okay, well, we do have about 45 of it, which we use for crops such as like soybeans and this year corn. We have brome. We have about 13 acres of brome. There's my home on it. And then in the front, we're in 2 parcels. In the front, we have a small house that is used for a rental. And there's land there, about 10 acres, that is used for growing also crops. Okay, and then of course the driveway leading to it. So that takes up the whole 80 and it goes quick.
Stu, I lost track. The 10 acres was used to grow what?
Also crops.
Oh, crops. Okay.
Yeah. So it's the same thing as what we have in the back. There's 45 acres in the back for crops, and then there's 10 more in the front.
So Stu, do you have an interest in protecting this land as, farmland, as cropland, as open space forever? Do you want to leave?
As long as I'm around, I would like that.
Here's a way that you can do that. And so what we do with landowners is have this conversation, and it's going to be very abbreviated, but it's a way in which you can leave a conservation legacy for future generations. And so I'm going to look at these sticks over here. And Stu, if we work out a partnership and place a conservation easement on your property, you retain ownership. And so I'm going to move this over.
Okay.
Let me just, oh man, you know what? I just realized.
Can't do it.
Why can't I?
That's
It must be because, oh, here it is.
Oh,
Sorry.
okay.
So you retain ownership.
Good.
And you also retain management, because you are going to both own the land and you also are going to manage it. So, and you're raising crops, you can lease it out to someone else. And so you're going to also be able to farm it. And on that cropland, currently you're raising corn and soybeans, but you could also raise horticultural crops on it. Now, in this case, you don't have a prairie.
We do.
You do have a prairie.
I should have mentioned that. We have
Okay.
an 8-acre prairie between the front and the, where my property is in the back. Well,
So-
it's all the same, but
So
it's
in
in the
this,
middle.
so in this case, right now you could plow that prairie, and you could put it into crops, corn and soybeans. But with a conservation easement, you give up that right to plow that prairie. And so that becomes a right that the Kansas Land Trust would hold. I mean, we only hold it to prohibit it from happening, but you gave up a particular right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Excuse me. When we started that, which was about 6 years ago, we did give it up at that time because we went through the agriculture department here in Douglas County. So we really we have to protect that for probably, I don't know, 10 years.
So you probably did it in the Conservation Reserve Program.
That's it.
Yeah.
Yes.
So the government essentially has a temporary lease on that it stays as prairie. And if you
Yeah.
violate it, you're going to have to pay them something for it.
Absolutely.
But in this case, it's forever. So that's a difference. It is for all future generations. And the Kansas Land Trust plans to be around forever to enforce that. Okay?
Mhm.
So do you do any recreation on your property?
Like walking it, is that what you mean? Or,
Right.
Okay. And we do have, we have a little area set up when my grandkids were smaller, like swings and, that type of thing, a little play area. Not a big area, but that's about it.
Do you or someone else hunt on the property?
No, we do not permit hunting.
Okay. You retain these recreational rights, including hunting. And in this case, you prohibit it yourself, but that is your particular right and you retain that right.
Mhm.
You
Right.
said, now, how far is this property from Lawrence?
It's, we're considered Eudora.
Oh,
But we're
Eudora.
the last street south in Eudora. We're about 4.5 miles south of 10 at the 1900 road exit.
Well, one of the rights you have is to subdivide it, and you could break it out into 5-acre residential homes. But with a conservation easement, you give up that right. So you cannot subdivide it. So that's going to be a right that the Kansas Land Trust holds as a restriction.
Right.
Do you allow public access on your land?
You mean as far as people coming in or
Mhm.
visiting? Yes. If you mean they can just come in, yes, they can do that.
But that is a right that you retain. You can decide who, since it's private property, who has permission or who doesn't have permission
Yes.
on the property. So that's a right that you will retain. And you didn't mention any woodlands, I don't believe.
We do have some. There is some a little bit to the west of the property. You're right. I did not bring that up. But that prairie, which is 8 acres, does go into that woodland.
Okay. So in most cases with a conservation easement, we hold the rights to the woodlands so they stay as woodlands, and you couldn't just clear cut it and turn it into crop field.
Okay, how do you describe your woodlands?
What we do is really mark it out on a map so we know what property is woodlands or what property is prairie or what property is cropland.
Okay, do you pick the type of trees or that you would want on that property, or?
No. What we're doing is locking sort of a snapshot of when you record this conservation easement, it is retaining those specific land uses at the time
Okay.
we close this.
Okay.
I mean, we would work with you with education and support to actually have a more mature and ecologically diverse woodlands with oak hickory, but we don't prescribe that.
Okay.
And you have the right for education and research as a private landowner if you want to have that happen.
Mhm.
And now with a fireworks stand, do you want to have a fireworks stand on your property?
No, but I do set them off July 4th at a certain point where they won't do damage to the house or to the prairie.
So the Kansas Land Trust would prohibit a non-A commercial activities like a fireworks stand. And I'm sorry, I have two public access here. I'm just going to get rid of that one.
Okay.
And with a conservation easement, you can sell the land or you can give it away. You retain that right because you're the owner. And with oil and gas wells, do you want to have oil and gas well drilling on your land in the future?
Absolutely, absolutely not.
So we take that particular right and hold it because this is a conservation legacy you want to leave. Now you are the owner of the property, so you still retain liability. So if something bad happens or you do a bad action and cause harm, you're responsible for that.
I see.
You mentioned you have some buildings on the property. Actually, I think 2 homes you mentioned.
Right.
So what we do is, since they're already there, we create a building site envelope. So within a specific footprint, that's where the buildings are. But you can't put buildings out in the middle of your prairie.
What do you classify buildings?
Any permanent structure.
Okay.
And usually I kind of describe it if you bring a backhoe or a cement truck out, and let's talk about that because that
Okay.
sounds to me like permanent.
Yeah, we have lean-tos. We have some lean-tos and a couple barns. And that was there when we bought it.
It's a farmstead. You cannot place a billboard on the property because that would be a permanent structure. And also it really takes away from the scenic value of the property. If you were to build a pond, you would have to get our permission to do that.
There are two ponds. There are two ponds on the property.
You can repair them. They're already existing. But if you want to build a new one, we'd have to talk about that. Now, let's say the county was going to put a highway or a street through your property and you wanted to stop it. And you wanted to use the Kansas Land Trust to stop it. We cannot, because the city or the county or government can exercise eminent domain. If there is a public benefit, then the conservation easement cannot stop it, but we can be an ally with you to make sure that you and the land trust gets fairly compensated. And we actually had one conserved property in which it was Grandview Plaza wanted to expand and they wanted to place water city wells on our protected property. And they actually went on our website, counted up the number of attorneys on our board and talked to the engineers, and eventually they said they didn't want to have that particular battle with us. But we can't stop. I mean, the city or municipality can exercise eminent domain, and they have done that with some traffic circles in Johnson County.
Right. I'm concerned that they would want to take frontage at some point because our roads are not even 20 feet of this, the road itself from across the road to this one. So that's always been on my mind.
So we would be partners in making sure that if there is a public interest and they have the right to take eminent domain, but then also you get fairly compensated by an appraised value.
Okay.
And agritourism is important for some folks. So that could be, you may not want to do it, but it is a right that you would retain. So if you wanted to leave a conservation legacy with the Kansas Land Trust, we would divide up these rights and do it through a legal recorded document that shows what conservation values get protected.
Let's see. Okay.
Any questions with folks about this?
Anybody?
I do not see any questions in the chat box at present.
Okay, I'm going to move forward. So we talked about conservation easements, but what it is a legal tool to leave a conservation legacy and protect natural features of land. And so this is a property that we're working on right now. It's in Gary County. It's on McDowell Creek. It is a replanted prairie here. And this is also oak hickory woodlands along McDowell Creek itself. And so with this particular landowner, we went through this exercise, and these would be the restrictions that would be placed on the property. These would be property rights that the Kansas Land Trust would hold so that this property in all future generation continues to look like this.
Ooh.
I mean, those are class 1 and 2 soil, so they couldn't be crop farmed anymore. They can put homes out there. They couldn't put a 7-Eleven there. They couldn't put a wind turbine there. They couldn't put a cell tower. It stays as green space.
Ooh.
So some properties in Douglas County that have been protected, Aiken Prairie, which is east of Lawrence, 16 acres. And we annually have wildflower walks on it. That's protected property. And some of you may have been out there. The Lawrence Nature Park, which is 100 acres, and we protected 37 acres. Bob and Betty Lichtbart created a conservation easement around 2001 with the Kansas Land Trust. To be honest with you, they wanted it to be a public park with public access, but they wanted the woodlands to forever be there. And so the role of the Kansas Land Trust is to be a watchdog to make sure those woodlands are forever there. And now that it's owned and managed by the city of Lawrence, it allows public access and hiking trails on it. And so we're a partner with the city, but also we're making sure that the wishes of the Lichtbarts forever are carried out.
Jerry, we have some questions in the chat box.
Okay.
As we get on. So let's see. Starting out with talking about the stand. Like you were talking about the fireworks stand, but somebody's asking about a vegetable or flower stand.
Vegetables and flowers are agricultural practices, so they would be allowed. And we write in within the easements to allow practices like that and marketing opportunities like that. And it's really important for when we have a conversation with the landowner to really think in the future and beyond their time there about what's allowed and what's not, and to make sure that we are carrying out the wishes of the landowner. So that's something that is negotiated and could be worked out.
Our next question, I'm not sure I understand. Julie may want to jump in here. Is there CO? So I'm not quite sure what Julie was asking there.
Carbon, what is that?
No, I don't hear Julie chiming in, so we'll move on. The next question is, do you have to have a certain amount of acres to do this?
Our easements range from 1 acre to about 5,000 acres, but generally we have a minimum of 20 acres. But that can be negotiated as well, because where the property is and what is the threat of development and what are the conservation values. Our 1 acre needs milkweed on it, which is a federally threatened species, a plant. But generally we were looking at 20 acres or more. But I think it could be negotiated. If it was 10 acres in the middle of the city that could have public access and had oak hickory woodlands on it, I would make a case that that's something that should be conserved.
Great. And here is Julie's question finished. Is there compensation to the owner for the easement?
That kind of depends. For the easements that we have protected lands around Fort Riley, those were purchased by the United States Army. And Fort Riley's interest is that they want to protect wildlife habitat. They want to also reduce neighbor complaints. They also don't want wind turbines to interfere with radar. But for outside of that, generally there is not direct compensation to the landowner, but they can claim a charitable donation or deduction on their income taxes because it is a charitable gift. So there can be some financial compensation to them. But in a case like in Douglas County, those are all been donated.
Yeah, and that was one of our questions, was about the tax deduction. Sort of another angle on the tax question was, does the easement affect the property tax assessment?
That varies. In most cases, it does not, unless it is in a highly residential area, then it may. But that would have to be explored with whoever the county or the city is to explore that, because I think that's pretty variable. But it's not assured that there is a property tax reduction because it's concerned. It depends.
Okay. Does anybody, is there anybody who wanted to jump in if I didn't get your question exactly right? Nope. Okay.
This is the, I mentioned the Lawrence Nature Park. We have 2 conservation easements, different landowners that protect parts of the 100 acres. This is the Kelly Barville Woodlands, one of our hikes in January. We also have an Old Father conservation easement in Douglas County, which has 60 acres. The Earls has about 134 acres. It's woodlands near Baldwin City. And while it's privately owned, Ralph and Roma are very gracious and invite people to hike on their trails with their permission. But it's still privately owned. It's adjacent to the Douglas County Fishing Lake. So it is contiguous and is sort of a buffer for that protected area. This is the Hamilton one by Eudora. And Stu, there's 5 water wells on it that supply water to Eudora. And the owner, Lois Hamilton, gives the water to the city of Eudora and donated the conservation easement for this property.
Wow.
This is the Guest Prairie. That's 30 acres. That includes prairie and also includes meets milkweed on it, which is a federally threatened plant. Jill, are you with us? This is your protected property in Douglas County. It is both it is both replanted prairie and woodlands, and it's 162 acres. And in this case, Jill, you were part of conserving this, and it's gone through 3 owners, landowners, since your ownership. And what we make sure is as it goes through different ownership, those conservation values are protected. And so it involves education with each owner to make sure they understand what they can and can't do. And in this case, we're really fortunate with the new owners, love this land, love the habitat. They are ecstatic about it. And so it works out real well to work with them.
Speaking of other owners, Jerry, that's something that a lot of people, it's hard to get your head around. So we do have a question in terms of when a property is sold, what options do the next owners have to revoke the easement? I know that's a common concern.
They have no options.
Mm-hmm.
This is in perpetuity. And we hope it never happens that we have a violation, but if there is a violation, we work to remedy it. But if it was like a midnight plowing of the prairie, we would take court action, legal action to stop that. Because that's why we're here, to honor and fulfill the wishes of the donor. We work to try to prevent that from ever happening. But that's that's the intent. When the Lickbards, conserved their woodlands, they wanted to make sure that the city would honor that forever. And so that's the role. Hopefully it's a partnership, but if it has to be that we're a watchdog, we are that as well.
When we sold this property, there was a developer who wanted to buy it. And when he found out about the easement, he yelled at us, called us un-American. And it was kind of a celebration for us.
Well, Jill, I'm sorry you had to go through that. In most of the cases, we have, 60 different landowners we deal with. Most of them are still the original donor. But we have one landowner that exactly feels that way. It's one that's it's near Linden, Kansas, and he feels that this is un-American. He feels that it's wrong that this happens. Has been hostile, but he knew what the restrictions were when he bought it. It was involved with the appraisal, it's in the title work. He's a person, even the county knows that he's sort of a difficult person. But that's 1 out of 60. And, but our responsibility is to be as proactive, to avoid violations, but also that's what you wanted to do, Jill. And so it's been through 3 owners. The second owner learned how to take care of the prairie better, how to manage the invasive species. And then the third owner is just, they want to grow old here. So thank you for that donation, Jill. And our role is to make sure that your wishes are carried out to all future generations. So it looks like this in perpetuity.
While you're going to your next slide, Jerry, I have another question. Someone who has 100 or so wooded acres wanting to know that would they be able to do silviculture or clear undergrowth for grazing on an easement?
I think that yes, I think that can all be negotiated with that individual, with that landowner. There might be means of sustainable harvesting as well. What wouldn't be allowed if it is a high quality woodlands that is clear cut. What we want to do is enhance or maintain the conservation values. So I think that can be negotiated and worked through. And if there's a follow-up question, I'm happy to talk more about that. The Hildesheim Prairie is also 61 acres, as well as a replanted prairie. This is Buck Creek Wildlife Area. And just before we had this meeting, I have a call that I need to return because the person wants to walk on this property. These are actually 840 acres. There's 3 different easements over a period of time. Roger Johnson and Lance Burr were owners and donors of these particular properties. It is now, and this is an example in which it was privately owned, but now it is publicly owned because these lands were purchased by the state of Kansas, and now they're managed by Kansas Department of Wildlife, Parks and Tourism. And so the Wildlife, Parks and Tourism intent is that this is wildlife habitat. So they're not going to do any development or trails, but they allow special hunting. And when there aren't hunting season, you as a public person can walk on it. You just need to get permission because they don't want people hiking when people are hunting. So it's all about public safety. But in this case, it's somebody wanted to leave a conservation legacy that eventually becomes public access, public lands.
I have another question in the chat box, Jerry.
Okay.
Here is the question. I'll just read it verbatim here. There are a large number of older Kansas farmers who likely do not have heirs who will farm the property, but who would like to preserve the land for agricultural use. Does the Kansas Land Trust have an outreach plan to explain the benefits of conservation easements to this group of landowners?
It's a wonderful opportunity, enormous opportunity. I don't think maybe not a specific outreach plan. We are always looking forward to talking to those owners about how they can leave a legacy for the future that they care about. And so if the person who raised that question has somebody in mind, please send them our way, because that's what we're here for. And I think there's a lot of people, there's a lot of landowners like that. This is the Stewick easement. Okay, this is 114 acres that is preserved in Johnson County. This is all under development. All around them, there's big mansions, big horse farms all around this particular property. This property, when it was conserved 12 years ago, that value of that easement was over $3 million. That's what they gave up because they wanted to protect it. And these owners placed on it a world-class disc golf course on it. And they used that course to raise money for charities. So though it's privately owned, they invite charities to bring their members and their supporters out to play disc golf, to get out in nature, and also raise money for good causes. So there's kind of creative ways in which people can leave a conservation legacy and help people get outdoors and also raise money for good causes. This is some of the outcomes for us. Most of our protected lands are prairie, and also we have almost 30,000 acres of virgin prairie that's protected. About 3,000 acres are woodlands. We as a land trust protect a whole variety of different properties: cropland, prairie, woodlands. Some are public parks. So we're looking for ways in which many landowners and with diverse land uses can leave a conservation legacy. It's also really important to protect water quality and stream banks. So we try to place riparian buffers along cropland too, just to protect the water quality. Over 1,300 acres are protected with public access. And these are the number of woodlands that we have. This is Buck Creek. We have 7 properties with Mead's milkweed, and it's a federally threatened species. And what it is an indicator of a very high quality prairie. So we're looking for the high quality indicator species to know what the kind of conservation values we're protecting. It's there to restrict wind development on it. They have a partnership with Wichita State University, so they're doing long-term ecological research, and they just put up this weather station on the property. And what they did is we created a building site envelope so that they can put structures within 10 acres. And since they have grad students coming out there, I think eventually they're going to put a little type of lodging unit and also storage unit for vehicles, because they want to do long-term ecological research. And so we worked that out, negotiated that kind of land use. So with all our 77 properties, it's almost $32 million worth of value, of conservation value with all these properties. And for those who give us money, we use that money 20 times, leveraging other funds to conserve land. And a donation of $35 helps us protect another acre of land. and this is our board. And Dean, I noticed Dean Goodell, who's our board president, was with us, at least he was earlier. And so these are our board members. We are also an accredited land trust. We were the first to be accredited in Kansas, and then we have renewed our accreditation as well, so that we're using the best practices. We also have a platinum seal of transparency with GuideStar, and these are our contacts. So with that, I'm going to stop share, and if there's questions for folks, I'm happy to answer those. Are the Baldwin Woods part of the land trust? No, they're not. Those are owned, or the University of Kansas owns some of the Baldwin Woods, and so those are preserved woodlands, but we as a Kansas Land Trust do not have any protected lands. Well, the Earls property would be. I take that back. The Earls property would be within the Baldwin Woods.
Jerry, I did get another question in the chat box about eminent domain. Can you explain again about eminent domain and conservation easements?
Yeah, I'm just thinking about how much I would dig up a picture if I could, but it'd take me 2 minutes to do that. You remember the picture that I had of the disc golf course? Johnson County, 114 acres, highly developed. The county, since there's more development, they wanted to enhance the intersection around that protected property. And in order to do that, they needed to put in a traffic circle. In order to put in the traffic circle, they had to take part of the protected land. And so we knew that from an earlier court case that they would win if we went to court again. And so in that case, they took about 2 acres of protected woodlands. The landowner wasn't happy about that. But the city, the county had the right to do that. So they took 2 acres for public safety. And but they took value from both the landowner and the Kansas Land Trust because that was protected land. And so we had a professional appraiser put a value on that property taking. Does that get at that question? So
if other people have questions along those lines, please go ahead and unmute and jump in if you have.
So in that case, the protected land shrunk from 114 acres to 112. So it got a little smaller. But there was a cash payment that was paid to the landowner and to the Kansas Land Trust. There's actually 2 eminent domains on that property. One was also a water district laid a water line on it. So that compensation to the land trust was about $36,000. We have set that aside as a board to conserve future lands. So the county took some land and took away protection, and the Kansas Land Trust was compensated and will protect other lands because of their use of eminent domain.
And another question here in the chat box is, do you negotiate with the owner to maintain the property to prevent noxious weeds, bindweed, kudzu, things like that?
Noxious weeds are a problem. Sericea lespedeza is a huge problem in prairies. Honeysuckle, woodlands. We're collaborators and partners, and we try to use education and work with them to do that. And so, we try to use education to help them use more effective management practices to manage invasive species.
So Jerry, what are your thoughts about putting it in your contract that the owner has to do something mechanical to prevent just that? what we hear on the hotline is people have 10 acres, 100 acres, and they just let it go to cedar and pot, you know? So like you're doing really good work, but these little spots of, productive land is, you could put it in your contract.
We'll have to talk about that. It takes on more responsibility for us because now we have to enforce it. It might be adversarial. It might have to go to litigation. Yeah, I mean, it would just take more resources on our part to know how to work through what might be an adversarial relationship then. I mean, your point is well taken. It is a big problem. We have some properties like that, and in some cases it was Army money that we have used to restore it, or we worked with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to use some cost share to do that as well. But it's still sort of a voluntary collaborative approach. We haven't used the adversarial approach to date on that. Not to say at some point maybe we have to, but I don't know what you think about that, Terry. It's a real tough issue.
Right. I really like your style. I like, rather than being adversary, to be educational and suggestive, to try to steer people into that. And Master Gardeners, the heck, we're happy to help. We like to kill noxious weeds, don't we, group? Everybody say thumbs up, yeah.
Well, we're going to do it this year, but because of the pandemic, we didn't. But we want to remove honeysuckle in Lawrence Nature Park. Yeah, and I think there was a question about, it's north of Free State High School and Folks Road. But that's for next year, and we're working with Courtney Masterson. We'll be working with Courtney Masterson to do that. So we welcome that work, that help.
You're also, if I believe correctly, you're restoring some prairie on that acreage at Lawrence Nature Park also, right there at near the entrance.
Yeah, it's both on, now that's the city land. We do not have that property conserved, but on the western edge we do. And so that's correct. And we're restoring it back to prairie, removing the brome on it. There is Sericea lesbiadisa there. When I walk there, I see it. It's, and if you go to Buck Creek, it's there too. What can I say? I don't like cedars, but at least cedars are easier to manage. Whether it's honeysuckle or Sericea lesbiadisa are big problems. So thanks for your help in fighting invasive species. We have one landowner and he's on a crusade. He says he's given up hunting animals because he's now hunting Old World bluestem through Gary County, and he does it on roads, on neighbors, on whoever. That's his mission on life, and he will forever be busy.
So do we have other questions? Maybe about particular questions about your own property or other properties you know of, or how these conservation easements work?
I just have a couple comments. I mean, I've worked with people in Wyoming, where I'm from, on conservation easements, and the cross-agency thing there has worked really well, like with ranches where Game and Fish needs to be involved. And I guess that's the thing I was thinking of most for some of it, some of it where agencies have common interests with the land trust.
There's, regarding the noxious weed thing, the county itself can assist with that as far as the adversarial part of it, not trying to set up neighbors against neighbors, but if you see a problem area, contact your county and they will take action. They'll send notices And if they're ignored, then they will go out and treat it and send a bill to the property owner. We're not in Douglas County, we're in Jefferson County, but we know too that there's no such thing as no maintenance. If somebody wants a no maintenance landscape or garden, they are fooling themselves. So low maintenance is a goal, but good stewardship should be the best goal. And taking care of, on our property, I know when we purchased it, it's been 40 years ago, but it had been farmed up to that point, and we honored the lease that was already in agreement until that was up. And then we had part of it sowed into brome. And, there was periods of time when family obligations and kids and work and everything piled in, and we weren't very good stewards of part of our section that's open. And it does not take very long for trash trees and all those things to take over if you're not being a good steward. So we know how that happens, and we got things under control and took a stronger lead again and have done our part in restoring it. But it's not easy, and people who think that they can maintain a no maintenance property are ignorant. I mean, I don't mean that as an insult, but that's just that's a foolish thought. Low maintenance at best, good stewardship is the best aim. So I think all of these programs that we look at are aiming towards that. Education and getting people to be good stewards is what we want. I'm done.
I totally agree, Nancy.
Okay.
By the way, on one of our properties, in this sort of rural culture, this is Gary County, Flint Hills land, and one of their neighbors was negligent, and rented out the land, but there was massive Sericea invasion, did nothing about it. And that went on for decades. But then it started to creep into the neighbors who were excellent managers, and they had enough. And that's when they let the county noxious weed folks know. And then one of our landowners purchased that land because he wanted to clean it up. So he worked with K-State to do random trials on summer burns to see what summer burns would do to reduce seed production and control the invasive species. So you're looking at what are options that people can use, but it was neglect led to a really serious problem and conflicts with neighbors.
We have a question here about a particular piece of property, the Hillesheim property.
Mm-hmm.
Wondering if that's part of as part of your in the Kansas Land Trust.
Yes, it is. I think it's 63 acres, replanted prairie, real nice replanted prairie. Mm-hmm.
And do you have any secret to controlling Lespedeza?
I tried doing it on our own land, like just mechanical control. I gave up. I then spot sprayed, just walked the property several times a year and carrying a backpack and just hand spraying and doing it several times. And I'll see it in new places, completely new places later. So yeah, I resorted to chemical control for approved herbicides. I've seen it where it just takes over. I mean, literally takes over. You can't even walk through it. It's far worse than cedars. No, I don't think anybody has good handle on this. I really don't.
Any other questions? People want to unmute and ask some questions. I have to say I remember back in my grad school days taking my land management class and learning about these conservation easements, and I've been fascinated ever since about just what a sort of a cooperative endeavor it is and how flexible this can be. And I just think this is just, I wish there was more publicity of this sort of operation, because like I said, it's a very cooperative approach to land management and land protection.
And it's really a more economical way to protect land without the purchase of land, because that's going to cost you 3-4 times or more the value of purchasing it. I mean, you always have more control if you own it and manage it. And that's why the Nature Conservancy, and credit to them, buy some land to manage it themselves, because they want, it has such high conservation values they want to protect. And I hope for the day in which the Kansas Land Trust can be in that position as well. But it's one way to work collaboratively with private landowners, because they are owning it privately, but also keep it as ag land or woodlands or prairie. And I really want to see more public access to being outdoors. I think this pandemic has emphasized that more than ever. When you have to, there was a kind of a national study of Americans and nature, and I think it was called The Nature of America. No, it's not quite right, but most people in the United States get outdoors as a means to socialize together. That's how people access nature. And so I think it's just absolutely critical, and especially with a pandemic and being outdoors is lower risk, that we give more opportunity for people to be outdoors in nature for their own health and for their own socialization. Everything from walking their dog to photography to just sitting to disc golf. All those ways in which people can be outdoors for a healthier lifestyle.
Well, those are great words to end on, Jerry. Thank you so much for, I'm sure there's a number of people who didn't know anything about Kansas Land Trust and conservation easements. And of course, if you have more questions for Jerry, you can contact the Kansas Land Trust to talk about those itty bitty particulars of such things. But thanks very much. I'll let Chris close us out.
If I could just add one final
yeah.
comment. You know, so many people connect with nature, and I think if we don't connect with nature, we neglect it and don't take care of it, don't value it. And it's you. I mean, it's gardening. It is getting right outside of your doorstep is the way most people connect to nature. So thanks for your work, your education in doing that. But it also makes our community more beautiful. So thanks to all of you, and keep up the good work that you do, because you really are on the front line of helping people connect to nature. So thanks.
And thank you, Jerry. You're talking to a lot of like-minded folks, and I really appreciate the presentation and what it taught us about how relatively easy it is to preserve things we love.
Okay, well, thanks everybody. I'll go ahead and end the meeting. This was recorded, so I'll put it up on our website. So if you have, if you want to go back and listen to particulars or contact Jerry at the Kansas Land Trust. Thank you all, and everybody have a great day. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks, Jerry.